Yeah, I'm recording.
Yeah? Do you know how to zoom?
No. How do I zoom?
There's a little thing on here.
Up here?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can zoom back and forth. Do you remember the show Zoom?
Yeah.
Do Zoom. That was old. That's pretty good if you remember that. Alright, we're on 11.4. Page 192. Man, will you pull the blind a little bit so we get a little more light on it?
He didn't see the movie either.
You didn't see the Mad World yet?
No. Did you watch the other Harold and Kumar?
I have not.
I watched it.
Not watched it. Alright. The first thing we want to go over is pedigrees. Page 192, 11.4. What is a pedigree?
Dog food.
Well, here's how pedigrees work. Pedigree, well, you think about a dog. A dog has a pedigree. What that means is a pedigree is a family history. A history of the dog's parents and their parents and their parents going on down many, many generations. They usually have them for a dog that's some pure breed to prove that he is a purebred whatever, whatever kind of terrier or whatever you like. And here's how pedigree works. A circle means a woman. A square means a man. A line between them means they get married and when they love each other very much, they have kids. The first kid was a woman. Second kid was a male. Third kid's a female. Fourth kid's a female. See how that works? This girl married some guy, and they had a couple of kids.
What if the
A male, two males.
Those are both females.
Yeah.
Two females, sorry.
What if the two center ones, the square and the circle, married each other?
That would be an incestuous relationship. But they could have kids too.
You make make a messed up circle.
How about this? It just keeps going.
Make a really messed up circle.
A triangle now or something.
It's a family from Alabama. Southern jokes. I can do that because I'm from Georgia. Okay, so anyway, I don't want to confuse too many people here, but
They're still married.
let's. And sometimes when you have a pedigree like this, you'll see that boxes or circles can be shaded. Shaded means affected.
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 Like disease.
Like this word, affected here. Now, affected means you have some kind of trait. For instance, the trait we may be interested in might be earlobes. Attached or unattached earlobes. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, big E is the allele for hanging earlobes. And little e is the allele for attached earlobes.
Hey, Coach.
Yes?
Say like my grandma has red hair.
Yeah.
And she married someone who didn't have red hair, and then her kids didn't have red hair, and then their kids didn't have red hair. Is that gene lost?
Not necessarily. It could be recessive, and we'll look at some pedigrees here. I'm not exactly sure how the genes work for hair color, but we're going to go through them for some other traits, and you'll see that things can stay in the family for a long period of time as a recessive trait. Now, just looking at this. If the colored in ones are attached earlobe people, do we know what their genotype is? If that has an attached earlobes, what's its genotype?
Little e, little e.
Little e, little e. Because little e is for attached earlobes, and you have to have both of them to have attached earlobes. You see? So I apparently we know what all these colored ones are. Those are the attached earlobe people like me.
Me too,
Attached
right
at the bottom.
here.
Do you have attached earlobe too?
I did.
Okay,
I think.
just wondering. Now,
I don't have earlobe.
if all of these are attached, then none of these are, because they're not filled in. So we automatically know that all of these have at least one big E, don't we? We automatically know that, but we don't necessarily know their other gene, but you can figure it out from a pedigree, and you're going to have to do this on the next test. Can we figure out what the other gene is, the other allele for each of these parents?
They're both little E's.
Not really.
You say they're both little E's?
That's me.
I agree.
Why do you say that, Harrison?
Because they need to both be little E's to make that guy.
To make this kid, each of these parents has to have a little E, because the kid gets one little E from each
And I
parent.
bet that two of his other ones have two little E's with them.
Okay, wait.
One has one big E with them.
Wait a second. What about this one right here? Can we figure out this one from that same logic?
Small.
Small.
It has to be a small e because it got a little e from this parent. Had to. Because it gets one of its alleles from each parent. So can we figure out this one?
Little small.
Because this one had a little e kid. This must be little e as well. Because this gets one little e from each parent.
Is that fun to say?
Little e,
Lily?
little e, little e, little e. What about these right here? Can we figure out what those are?
One has a big one, one has a little.
We don't know that, but you
You
can
can
assume that
guess
one's a
what
big one and
they
one's a
probably
small one.
have.
You don't really know. There's no way to know for sure what this other gene is, because it could have got two big E's or a big E and a little e. Could have got two big E's from each parent, or one of them could have got a little e. So you don't know for sure. So this is going to be big E question mark. And so will this, big E question mark.
Is that the scientificness?
That's bad, isn't it? Big E question mark.
Really put it just a question mark.
Okay? So what I'll do is I'll give you a pedigree that's not filled in. And on the test, and I'll have something like this. I'll say, it'll look kind of like this on your next test. Go ahead and get you ready for it.
And that's the essay.
It's part of the problem sheet, yeah. And I'll say, what is that one? And choice A will be big E, big E. Choice B will be big E, little e. Choice C will be little e. And choice D will be big E question mark. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
And I might ask it for that too. And I might ask it for that also. And there's 3 questions. If you know what you're doing here, you can get 3 questions right. You see? It's not too hard. These things aren't that difficult, but you do, if you've never seen it before, or you're not here today, and you didn't study, and all of a sudden this thing appears in front of you, you might have some problems with it. There's one where they've already filled out all the letters.
Wait, did some cousins?
Yes.
Yeah.
I see
Yes,
some
2 cousins mating.
We're good.
Relatives on top.
Now, one of the things that clues you in that this is a recessive disorder is because you have parents that didn't have it, had a kid that had it. That's always a clue right there. If you see a kid has it and the parents don't, it has to be recessive.
There's this one South Park where these 2 parents, normal parents, and then what you call it? They had what you call it? I think 6 ginger kids, maybe.
Ginger kid.
Yeah.
What's
4.
a ginger kid?
Was it 4 ginger? 4?
I don't know what that is.
It's when they have pale skin, freckles, and red hair, and no soul.
Well, now South Park isn't always scientifically accurate.
Most of the time.
Now this is a dominant disorder.
Take all my stuff.
Okay.
It was making fun.
Wait, we gotta keep going. We have a lot to do today. This is a dominant disorder. And this is a pedigree where the disorder, and if we look at this, if I remade this pedigree, on a dominant disorder, it's possible that two parents have the disorder, like on the chart. But they have kids that don't have it. So let's take a look. If you just looked at this, okay, and let's not do earlobes. Let's do hitchhiker's thumb. How many of you have hitchhiker's thumb?
No idea what that is.
Hitchhiker's thumb is where your thumb bends backward. See how mine bends backward? I definitely have hitchhiker's thumb.
I was got it.
Some people don't have it. Caroline, you don't have it. You have straight thumb. Hold your thumb up so everyone can see. See, hers doesn't really bend back much.
Is mine hitchhiker's thumb? You heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's-
we used to do thumbs up like this all the time.
That's not.
I can't do it anymore.
If it bends back, they say if it bends back 45 degrees, it's hitchhiker's
Is that
thumb.
hitchhiker's thumb?
Yeah, that's hitchhiker's
I'm
thumb.
pretty sure I think that's that.
Yeah, that's it. No, yours is straight thumb.
Yeah, I'm a straight thumb.
That row is straight thumb. That's the straight thumb
The
row.
worst one.
So let's look. Hitchhikers.
Straight thumb. It's all about if I could do it.
Take a look here. Hitchhikers is either big H, or big H, little h. And straight thumb is little h, little h. So everything filled in here has hitchhikers. So we say this is a dominant disorder, hitchhikers. So everything that's not filled in, pay attention here. Everything that's not filled in is straight thumb. So we can go ahead and fill these in. These are all little h, little h. And the idea is now we got to figure out what all these are. We know since they're filled in, and this is a dominant disorder. It's not really a disorder, but it's a dominant trait.
Got a disorder.
Yeah, it doesn't. You're okay if you have hitchhiking.
I can
You
do
don't
it.
have some disorder.
Actually.
So we know they all have a big H, but what is the other one? Can we figure out what the other one for these parents is?
Yes.
They had a little H kid.
They don't both have to be little H.
They don't. Yeah, they do. Both
They
parents do.
definitely have to.
Because this kid got one from each parent.
Yeah, G.
What about this parent here?
Little H.
That's also a little H because it has a kid.
And then question mark.
And what about this kid?
Little H.
Little H.
He also has a little H because this parent had a little H. He had to get that one of those.
The other two guys are
Question marks.
So and these two are question marks. So you see how this is done. It's like I say, it's not that difficult. They're fun. I like to do them. Now, the book goes over some human disorders, some recessive disorders, and some dominant disorders. We're going to start with Tay-Sachs disease. It's a recessive disorder. This kid has Tay-Sachs disease. Now, what Tay-Sachs disease is, there's an enzyme made by your cells that normally breaks down a fat molecule. And this person has a mutation that causes them not to make that enzyme correctly. And this fat builds up in their cells and basically poisons them. And Tay-Sachs causes death at a very young age. There's no cure. And as it describes here, development begins to slow down between 4 and 8 months of age, and neurological impairment and psychomotor difficulties then become apparent. The child gradually becomes blind and helpless, develops uncontrollable seizures, and eventually becomes paralyzed. There's no treatment or cure. Most affected individuals die by the age of 3 or 4 years old. It's called Tay-Sachs disease. And you usually find it in Jewish people, because the first mutation occurred in a Jewish person. Tay-Sachs, we'll call it little t. If you're little t, you have Tay-Sachs. The mutation probably came about in a person many, many generations ago that was Jewish, that was big T, little t. Before that mutation, all people were big T, big T. But somebody who developed a mutation, big T, little t, and passed it on to their kids, the recessive disorder, and eventually it ended up in lots of people, and if any of those two people mate, they could have a kid with Tay-Sachs. Jewish people tend to marry other Jewish people. That's why it's mostly found in the Jewish religion. You had a question earlier?
You were saying like wouldn't.
I was saying like, wouldn't that disease be like, or it's probably like incredibly uncommon because
It's very uncommon. Yeah, 1 in 3,600 Jewish people in the United States have it.
You don't have philosophy
If you have it, you only live at age 4 or something. Yeah. But it's if you're a carrier, you married another carrier, then you can pass it on. Now here's another terrible disease. It's called cystic fibrosis. It's little c, little c. And most of us, or all of us, are either big C, or big C, little c. But if you're big C, little c, which 1 in 20 Americans are, we got about 20 people in this classroom. One of us is probably a carrier.
there's probably like 10.
Well, there's 13.
Oh,
It's probably Madison.
Madison.
There's 12.
Definitely Madison.
But anyway, if you're a carrier, and you happen to marry another carrier, and you have kids, there's a chance that the kid has cystic fibrosis. And it does happen in 1 in 2,000 newborns in the United States. And cystic fibrosis is a disease where you don't make mucus correctly. The mucus that lines your airways and lines your digestive system is real thick. And it's because of a protein that normally moves sodium from one side of a membrane to the other. It doesn't work right. And you end up with thick mucus that ends up clogging up your lungs and capturing bacteria. And you normally live no older than, say, 17, 18 years old. Some people do live longer, like this first guy they showed.
All cystic fibrosis is less
Listen.
severe than most of his fellow sufferers. But like everyone with CF, he knows how he will die. His lungs will fail. Patients begin to drown in their own mucus from within a few months of birth. Randy Fisk is 13. On a good day, she endures 2 hours of physical therapy that shakes the mucus from her lungs.
When I'm doing really good, I feel I don't think about it as much, but like if I'm sick and stuff, then I like start thinking about it. Well, I'm always happy because, I mean, I don't focus on the sickness too much. I just focus on my life and like what's happening. So.
90% of patients die because of lung failure. There's the breath burden that people have. And then of course there are all the things that we ask them to do to take care of themselves that take up a lot of time.
Can you tell me this too? In the beginning, in the very beginning, I felt like she was like a China doll and so fragile that, you know, if I did anything wrong, that she was gonna die, or, you know, it was really hard for me. But then, you know, year after year, you know, you adjust, and now it's like a routine. I mean, we all know what has to be done, and you get used to it, right? It's just like part of our life now.
Brandy still breathes because of physical therapy and antibiotics. But as well as the lungs, CF clogs the intestines, so sufferers can't digest food properly. They stay small and thin. Both men and women CF patients are usually infertile, and if they live long enough, CF can cause diabetes. Salty sweat is the least of their problems.
She's like a flower. She really is like a flower. She's, I don't know, God has always been with her because she's bubbly and joyful and happy all the time. That's why when she got sick and was really set back, I was like, I thought I was losing her. I really thought that I might was losing her.
If Brandy had been born in any other time, she would already be dead. Long before it was a disease, cystic fibrosis was a curse. Medieval European folklore warned, beware the child whose forehead tastes salt when kissed, for he is cursed and soon must die.
Beware the child that who, when he has sweat on forehead,
But it's salty.
Salt when he's kissed.
Cystic fibrosis is the leading killer of genetic disorders for white people.
What's it for black people?
For black people, I'll show that one to you in a minute. It's called sickle cell disease. Now, phenylketonuria is a disease that is a genetic disorder, occurs once in 5,000 births, and it's actually it's a neurological disorder. It's, what happens is there's an amino acid called phenylalanine. And it's present in a lot of foods. It's present in some soft drinks. It's present in milk. And people who have phenylketonuria can't break down phenylalanine correctly. They don't have the enzymes to break it down. And it builds up as a poison in their nervous system, and you can die from it. What they can do is, if they know phenylketonuria runs in your family, they can test you for it, and if you have it, you can just avoid foods with phenylalanine. And you kind of stay on that kind of diet for all your life, and you'll never have any problems. So these people do not have any problems. They're trying to collect money, I guess, for research for it. But it's the only picture I could find. So
It's helpful for them to look sad and all too.
yeah, because they said look sad now. People send more money. Now, sickle cell disease is the leading killer amongst black people.
Here in the book, and pretty much everywhere, it always says leading killer for African Americans.
African Americans.
I mean,
Yeah, but it's not only
what about for
African
people who aren't African? What if they're British Africans?
African descent.
I don't know. Of African descent? That's a good
I
question.
mean, they try and go.
I see your point.
But it's vague and incorrect.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
how I see it.
We need to change the, what is it, the lexicon? Is that the word? Okay, this is a normal blood cell. If you have sickle cell disease, your blood is shaped like that, some of it. And what ends up happening is these blood cells will clog up your smallest blood vessels called capillaries. And your little blood vessels will get clogged, and your blood doesn't flow correctly, and you end up dying at a young age. Some people live to age 40 or 50. Some people die earlier. The severity is different for different people. But basically, there's two genes you can have for your hemoglobin. The normal gene is HbA. Hb stands for hemoglobin, which is a constituent of the blood cells. It helps make up the blood. So most people are this, HbA, Hba. Some people are this, HbA, Hbs.
Oh no.
And that's the heterozygote. S is the sickle cell gene. And a person with sickle cell is this, HbS, Hbs. Now, sickle cell gene is kind of a neat thing. If you're this, it's a side effect that you happen to be immune to malaria. So this person is actually kind of a super person. They cannot get malaria. And so in places that have a lot of malaria, like in Africa, these people do very well. And they'll have lots of kids because they survive for a long time. These people in Africa often die of malaria. So you have a lot of these people in Africa because it imparts a malarial resistance. But the problem is, if one of these people marries another one of those people, they can have sickle cell kids. And so you have a lot of sickle cell disease in Africa. And that's why it's present in black people, because black people came from Africa. You see?
Oh my God.
Now this is a dominant disorder called neurofibromatosis.
Coach, really?
Now listen,
Oh.
dominant disorders,
Looks like a freak show.
if you're big N, or big N, little n, you have neurofibromatosis. Now most people don't have it, so almost everyone is little n. This is most of the population. And if a normal person that's little n marries somebody else that's little n, all the kids are going to be little n. So you don't get it unless one of your parents has it. Now this is a severe case. What those are little tumors. They're benign tumors. They just can grow. And in some people have it and hardly grow any tumors. And some people have it and grow a whole lot. This doesn't kill the person usually, it's just unsightly. Look at this one, guys. These cancers come in nerve cells. It's basically a cancer found in nervous tissue, and it will grow and cause areas usually that have a lot of nerve cells, like the face or the hands, to grow these tumors.
Can you still see out of that eye, you think?
I don't know. That's a good question. They had a surgery here to remove some of the growth. Often you see it look like this. It looks like little, just tiny growths, and it doesn't hurt, but it can be passed on to your kids. It's called neurofibromatosis. Have you ever heard of the Elephant Man?
Yeah.
This was back in the 70s or 60s. There was a guy who was a sideshow attraction. They called him the Elephant Man because it kind of looked like he had elephant skin. And this is what he would have looked like had he not had the disease. A computer animation that took lots of pictures of him figured it out, what he would have looked like. That was kind of a famous case. It's not so popular now. They made a movie on him back in the 70s about the Elephant Man. He had a hard life, obviously. He was had to go through a lot. Now this is a disease called Huntington's disease, which is also a dominant disorder. If you're big H, or big H, little h, you have Huntington's. Most of us are little h.
All of us are little.
And this started in a Venezuelan family. A Venezuelan woman years ago got the little h mutation and passed it on. And many of her descendants are carriers. And if two of those descendants marry one another, they could have a Huntington's kid.
So that lady right there would have to have children.
Yes. Now, what happens is Huntington's doesn't strike until late middle age, in your 40s or 50s. So you can have it and not know it, have kids, and then you see it in the kids. Here's video footage on it.
Do the kids not really get it until they're older?
Not until they're older.
Lake Maracaibo, Venezuela. Here, 100 years ago, a woman named Maria Concepcion Soto died of a neurological disorder called Huntington's disease. Today, her descendants carry her deadly gene. Huntington's disease usually strikes in midlife. It causes slow deterioration of the brain and nervous system. There is no treatment, no cure. In New York City, Nancy Wexler is a clinical psychologist. Her mother died of Huntington's.
When my mother was diagnosed, my father took my sister and me into his room and said, your mother has this illness, it's failed, and each of you has a 50-50 risk of inheriting it. And I think from that day, really my life changed enormously.
In 1981, Wexler went to Venezuela to track the defective gene.
¿Tú conoces alguien de Niveles, Flores, en Ciarte, que vive aquí? Ángel, yeah.
The villages along Lake Maracaibo contain the highest concentration of Huntington's disease in the world.
Cileira Margarita. Cileira?
Wexler is charting a family tree to establish the pattern of inheritance. Eventually, it will include over 2,000 people. Half stand a 50-50 chance of developing the disease. Many are children. To understand Huntington's, scientists must first find the defective gene. It is an anxious moment for young Beatrice Soto as a sample of her blood is taken. Wexler will collect over 250 samples. Somewhere in the DNA is the answer. At Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, Wexler's samples are turned over to biologist James Gazella. Looking for a gene is like looking for a needle in a haystack. But Gazella had a plan. He would compare the DNA to find a marker, a distinctive pattern that is always inherited with the disease. The search might have taken decades. Incredibly, on the 12th try, he found a marker.
This is an example of typing people with the marker linked to Huntington's disease. Each lane here represents the DNA from a different member of the very large Venezuelan family that Nancy Wexler has collected. And we can correlate the patterns shown here with the relationships of these people in the very large Venezuelan family as to who is parents of the various children, who's the mother, who's the father. We then look at those patterns and see which one correlates in inheritance with the disease gene. In this particular case, it's denoted by the presence of this lower band here underneath a more common band found in everyone. In this case, we have an affected woman who has this band, whose husband is unaffected and doesn't have it. They had 4 children. The first 2 children do not have the band, and they, in fact, do not have Huntington's disease. The next 2 children do have the band, and they both have Huntington's disease.
For Nancy Wexler and the people of Lake Maracaibo, the discovery of the marker is a mixed blessing. Eventually, it will lead scientists to the gene for Huntington's, and hopefully to a cure.
When you look at those children, and you know that some of those children have to be carrying this fatal gene, and you know what's going to happen to them. You see it. You go in and you visit their mothers and fathers dying in bed, and you know that that's going to happen to them. It's absolutely horrifying. And I know before we found the marker that sometimes I would feel holding a little girl who was dying of Huntington's, and I wanted to shake her as if I could just shake that gene out of her. I could see what was in it. And I would know, where are you and what are you doing to her? And it keeps you possessed. I think we work like madmen down there a lot of times, because you know that if you get there that much sooner, 1 year sooner, then maybe you're saving lives.
It is a race against time to hunt down the deadly gene before a new generation falls victim. But for the children of Lake Maracaibo, there is now hope.
It's an interesting idea that they have, now that they have a test. There's a test you can do, what they showed when he was showing you the bands. That scientist figured out a test for Huntington's disease. So they can take a kid that doesn't know if they received the big H from their parent who has already died of Huntington's, that doesn't know, and they can do the test on that kid and tell if the kid is going to get Huntington's or not. And, since there's no cure, you can't do anything about it, but you can control whether you have kids or not. And you can even do prenatal testing, which is testing in the womb. And you could, theoretically, and this is how you could end this disease, you could theoretically have an abortion, and a lot of people do this now, if they find out that they have a fetus with Huntington's, they have an abortion. I know a lot of people hate even the thought of abortion, but think about this now. If every person whose parent had Huntington's was prenatally tested and did have an abortion if they ever had a pregnancy that had Huntington's, that would end Huntington's in one generation. If no new kids are born with Huntington's, the disease would be gone.
But it could start up again.
It could start up again with the mutation, but that mutation doesn't seem to have ever started anywhere else except for Venezuela. So that went well in one case.
We'd have to kill all the Venezuelans first.
To nuke Venezuela?
Well, you could nuke Venezuela, but some of them have moved, and that wouldn't really...
Come on.
How about just nuke all of South America?
Just, you could kill everybody on the planet, and then that would end all disease.
Yeah.
It would end all life, too.
Yeah, well, of people.
I mean, cockroaches.
And yes, maybe people would evolve again somehow, but why isn't this changing? Here we go. Okay, so read about the dominant and recessive human disorders. Those are interesting. And you know, consider yourself lucky if you're healthy. I always think about that when you see all these unfortunate people. Page 196. Now this is section 11.5. This section talks about some ways that genetics can be different than Mendelian genetics. I mean, we've studied big H, and big H, and little h. There are sometimes ways in which genetics is different than normal Mendelian genetics. For instance, these flowers that are called 4 o'clock flowers, they have genes called R1 and R2. Now, if you have 2 R1s, you're going to be a red flower. If you have 2 R2s, you're going to be a white flower. But what if we cross a red with a white? The kid will get an R1 from this parent and an R2 from that parent, but that will turn out a pink kid. It's not like Mendelian genetics. You don't have red dominating over white,
So it is
or
like
white dominating over red. This is like blending theory, and you end up with a pink. And then if you were to make 2 of those pinks together, 1/4 of the kids would be red, 1/4 of the kids would be white, and half would be pink. So it's a little bit different. Mendel would call this a 1:2:1 ratio if he had done this. And he may have never come to his conclusions had he worked with 4 o'clock flowers instead of peas. So this is kind of like blending theory, and we call this incomplete dominance. Incomplete dominance means one is not completely dominant over the other. There's a mix. Isn't that interesting? Now, actually, Mendel was smarter than that. He knew that some plants don't work exactly predictably. And he chose peas because they seem to be very predictable. So he actually didn't just stumble upon peas. He chose that plant. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is something called multiple alleles. In pea plants, you have big T is tall and little t is short. But that's not the case with every trait. There's only 2 alleles for height in pea plants. But in human blood types, there's 3 possible alleles out there. There's IA, means type A blood. IB means type B blood. And little I means type O blood. So there's 3 alleles out there. Now, one human can only get 2 of those 3. You get one of these from your mom and you get one from your dad. And this makes it so there's more combinations than we're used to with Mendel's traits. For instance, if you're IA, you're type A. But you're also type A if you're IA, little I. because this dominates over that. Type B could be IB, IB, or, can you guess? IB little I. And then there's something called type AB. Does anyone here know their blood type, by the way?
I think I'm like B positive.
B positive? Well, the positive and the negative we worry about later. But type AB is, guess what? IA, IB. And then what do you think type O is?
Little I.
Very nice. Y'all said that at the same time. You're not allowed to say any more words until someone says your names. That's the old jinx rule. Have y'all ever heard that?
Yeah.
Okay. So look at all the combinations you can have. 2, 4, 6 different combinations. When there's only 2 alleles for a trait, there's only 3 different combinations. There's big T, big T, little t, or little t, because there's only 2 alleles. But if there's 3 alleles, there's 6 combinations. And you can imagine if there were a 4th allele, there'd be even more. There'd be 12 combinations. It doubles each time.
What would happen if somebody had 2 sets of DNA?
I don't know.
That'd be weird.
It probably wouldn't survive. You have to have the right number of chromosomes. Now, page 197 talks about something new called polygenic inheritance, or something else called polygenic inheritance. Any questions about blood type? Oh, by the way, let me fill you in what this means, what these letters are for. Should probably do this. These letters tell about proteins that are on the surface of the cells.
Identification proteins.
Identification proteins. Type A has type A proteins on the outside. Now, they don't really look like letter A's. They're really globular proteins, but I like to draw just A. And type B has B's on the outside. And yes, if you were wondering, it does take exceptional talent to draw upside down letters. Guess what type AB has on the outside? A's and B's. Took me years to get good at this. And guess what type O has on the outside? Nothing. Do you see? So this refers to the types of proteins that are identifiers on the outside of the cell. Now this next section talks about polygenic inheritance. Polygenic inheritance refers to the fact that some traits, whoa, you can turn that, okay, you got it? The people at home just freaked out. Polygenic inheritance refers to the fact that some traits have more than one gene. For instance, in pea plants, there's only one set of alleles, one pair of alleles you get for height. And you're either tall or short. But in humans, there might be 8 different genes for height. All of these stand for height. I'm just using the letters A through F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's suppose there's 6 pairs of genes, every one of them for height. And when we have many pairs of alleles all contributing to the same trait, we just consider the upper letter cases are tall and the lower letter cases are short, and you just count up the number of contributors. Like for instance, this person has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 uppercase, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lowercase. So they got 6 tall genes, or tall alleles, and 6 short alleles, so they end up medium height. Shaquille O'Neal, he's tall, he's got all uppercase. That's about as tall as a human can get. My older sister is 4'8". She weighs 88 pounds.
Really?
Yeah, she's 41 years old.
Wow.
She's tiny. She's like a little person. She's not a midget. Her growth hormone works correctly. She's just real small.
4'8".
She's all lowercase. If an all lowercase person, my sister, married an all uppercase person, Shaquille O'Neal, what kind of kids would they have? Well, the kid would get one of the genes, one of the A genes from Shaq, and one of the A genes from Sarah. One of the B genes from Shaq, and one of the B genes from Sarah. You see what I'm saying? What would their kids be?
Medium.
They'd be all medium. And this is indeed the case. If in the world they have gone and looked at people, and if you ever have a real tall person marrying a real short person, almost all the kids are about the same size. Now there are other things that affect your height, like the food that you eat, and how often you smoke, and how much exercise you do. If you eat your veggies, you can change your genetics a little bit. Like obviously I'm so short, I must have smoked a lot and drank and done a lot of drugs and stuff. Or I had short parents. I'll let y'all guess.
Your parents were pretty tall though, weren't they?
No, my parents were really short. I'm the tallest one in my family. I'm taller than both my mom and my dad. So I ate my veggies. And my Flintstones vitamins.
Oh yeah.
Mom made me take. So this shows, this is a polygenic inheritance for wheat color on a type of wheat plant. And you end up with, whenever there's polygenic inheritance, you end up with a bell curve of possibilities. Dark wheat plants are all uppercase. Light wheat plants are all lowercase. But most wheat plants have some uppercase and some lowercase. So just like most people are about medium height, there's only a few smalls and a few talls. So that's polygenic inheritance. And that's kind of like blending theory, because you're mating, you have all sorts of combinations, and the kids usually end up as kind of sort of like the dad and sort of like the mom together.
Does Shaq have kids?
Shaq has a lot of kids.
Really?
And a lot of ex-wives.
Are they all the same height?
What is wife?
They're all, I don't know how tall his wives are. Look at the bell curve of people. Okay, read the section 11.4 and 11.5, and tomorrow we're doing a lab, so bring your lab book. Will us out?